Hello, welcome to our January 25th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test and then we'll go ahead and get started. Bear with me just for a moment. Hello, welcome to our... Okay, sounds like my monitoring computer is working fine. See if I could refresh my chat. So my name is Greg Undo. I'll be the host for the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you could submit questions in advance, or you could submit questions in advance by emailing to clubcubase@steinberg.de, or you could simply send enter your message in the chat field. So as we work with that, so when asking questions, we realize that sometimes my ability to answer questions in real time will soon be impossible to do. So I may be behind the actual live chat. But we'll try to get through all the questions as completely and distinctly as possible. So we will go ahead and when asking questions, if we could take a moment to clarify which version of Cubase that you're running. Also, if you could tell us what operating system you're using. And so if you're running Cubase 10, 11, 10.5, if you're running LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, that information is helpful. So if we could try to include that information, it would be great. Again, since I will be delayed in answering the questions in real time, if you don't see an exact, if you don't see a response immediately, if we could try to avoid asking the same questions over and over again repeatedly, that just kind of slows down the whole process. So I appreciate that. And we should have all the topics posted for today's live stream on later tonight. So where there will be timestamps for each of the questions and topics discussed. So look for that a few hours after the live stream. I have to go through and rewatch the live stream and type up the index. So, and if you wanted to search for indexes or topics covered in previous live streams, Jan from Stockholm has been kind enough to create the Cubase Index website. So special thanks to him. We also have two people that serve as moderators. You see that they're both on already, Agent K and Jazz Dude. So they're not Steinberg employees, but they're just kind of doing this to help the community. So I want to give a special thanks to them. Also, one other fantastic resource, in addition to all of the Steinberg resources available to learn about that's really beneficial to the community, is the Cubase Nation Discord. So check that out. And Jazz Dude does a lot of work compiling useful and relevant information with that. So with that information, let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so we see question. Hey, Greg, is there any way to have two projects open in Artist 11? Needed it recently so I could save some track presets and see if it was working in the new project I was working on. So you could have two projects open, but there's going to be one active project. So if I wanted to come over here and open a secondary project, I could just come right here. So we'll just open this project. And as soon as I have two projects open, we see this little, almost like a lightning bolt. This would indicate that which project is currently active and open. So if you wanted to just kind of switch back and forth between the active projects, you could just do it like that. So you have multiple projects open, but one active at a time. So you should be able to kind of toggle back and forth pretty quickly. Okay. All right, so we have a question from Sean. Just says, question rumor, heavy hitting inserts on separate FX tracks in a chain will utilize a processor's multiple cores, but having them all on the same audio track will only use one core. Is that true? So I think for the most plugins, it could be broken down into like one track is, I haven't done testing on it recently, but one track and all of its plugins may utilize one processor core. I could confirm this, but I believe that's kind of how it's kind of broken down with just about every DAW when utilizing plugins. So if you go to the next track and add plugins, that would then do the processing on that could separate the cores. So I believe that's the case, but I haven't tested it recently, so I could try kind of a large scale test just to confirm. But I believe that's the case, and that's how it works with virtual instruments. But some virtual instruments, such as if we get Hallian, so if we just come over here, we'll add an instrument track. Some plugins are set to scale across multiple. So say if I come here to my Hallian Sonic SE, I can now open this up, and some of the instrument plugins, which are kind of notorious for this, don't scale correctly. But if we wanted to go to like in the Hallian family, Hallian Sonic SE, Hallian, if you go to options here, you could activate multi-core. So you could see and utilize multiple cores within one particular instrument. So I've tested that, and that does make a difference. All right, so we see Javonovic 3D just asking people to confirm if he could see his message, so I could see it. Okay, so we see Benny from Sweden. We see Stefan from Sweden as well. All right, and we have Soren in Sweden, so we have 3 Swedish people right in a row checking in. And if you are watching us live, please feel free to introduce yourself. And as I'm kind of reading through comments, I just want to, I think next Friday's live stream will be the last of the month, so we will do our Zoom meetup. And if you haven't done that, it's a great way to meet other people on the live stream. So I'll have a link for Friday's live stream, or if you want to email me, I'll give you a Zoom link. All right, so we have Alan from Bellevue, Washington. So we was able to help him out over email. So glad it's working for you. And we see Michael Pierce from London, from checking in from Chile, UK. All right, we have Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, so we have a question from Soren. Usually split the track list with the track list divider. Can I move between upper and lower track list with a key command? So let's say if you wanted to do this, like I have my marker track currently in the upper zone here. So let's say if I wanted to, so when we navigate, I could go up and down with tracks in the lower zone, and I could have tracks in the upper zone. But let's see if there's a way to navigate down. If there's a key command, I don't know of one off the top of my head. I'll just look under divide track list. So you may have to click between. We just try when our just key command just out of curiosity, but I don't think that there's a way with a key command to kind of jump between the divided track lists I know of, but I could do some more research if you want to email me, Soren. All right, so we see Tim Weinheimer from Mission Viejo. We have John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin. All right, and we have the Cube checking in from Melbourne, Florida. Thanks for being a part of the community today. All right, so we have a question. Is there a possibility to run two interfaces sync? I run Cubase Artist 11 on Windows 11. So generally, you know, if you wanted to do it on Windows, you would need to utilize the ASIO for all. Some audio interfaces will allow you to do that. So if you have FireWire interfaces, or if you utilize PCI-based interfaces, they can generally run multiple interfaces, generally within the same family, so that they can be synchronized. But for some reason, USB audio interfaces aren't designed to do that. Some people may go to their audio system and use an ASIO for all, and that would allow you to use through, it's kind of like a wrapper for Windows drivers, but you know, the use of it could be less than satisfactory. And the problem gets to be is that, you know, while there's two interfaces connected, that the two interfaces aren't resolving, you know, their clocks to each other that way. And there's no way, so you're kind of sending out audio to two different streams. And when we're creating an environment like a DAW, we need to know exactly, you know, what the latency is on the stream. So that's why most USB, I don't know of any USB audio interfaces that really allow you to stack interfaces, so it's more of a limitation of a USB audio interface. But if you have, like I have old MR816s in my studio, and I have two of those connected, and if you have, you know, if you want to run like, you know, two MADI cards, you could utilize that, you know, if you're doing like off of PCI bus. But generally, you know, it's going to be one interface at a time. But many interfaces may have like an ADAT output. So if you're looking just simply to expand to have, you know, 16 inputs and outputs, consider running one as a standalone converter that could connect into the primary interface, which would be defined in Cubase via ADAT light pipe. And that could give you additional ins and outs. Okay, so we see question, Cubase 10.5 on Windows 10 updated. What's the best way to migrate Cubase to a new computer? So if you have your Cubase license, you don't indicate which version of Cubase it is, but if you have your Cubase license on an e-licenser, all you would need to do is to literally, you know, install Cubase on your new computer and move the particular USB e-licenser over to the new computer. If you have a soft e-license, you could move the soft e-license to a USB e-licenser and then migrate, or go to the Steinberg website and you could reactivate if it's a soft license. Regarding different parameters that are kind of have been user created from your Cubase experience, if you go to your profile manager, this would allow you to export your preferences, key commands, macros, track presets that have been user created, as well as, you know, stuff like global workspaces as well. So go to your edit menu and export, go to profile manager and export the profile, and then import it into the new system. All right, so we have Peter checking in from Montreal. We see Mark Rabin is on, as well as Mandy Lane. Thanks for joining us today. All right, and we have Rick Prance, or France, checking in from Oregon. So you say, hi, Greg, can the Cubase 11 project be saved to 2 separate places / drives simultaneously? So, you know, when we go to save a project, it's just going to be saved to a particular location. So if we wanted to save the project at this point, we could, you know, save the project and that would go to one defined location. There isn't a way to have it automatically duplicate to, you know, to save multiple versions or multiple projects to different folders. So a lot of times this could also be contingent on the projects, you know, the project file is independent of, you know, if you're doing audio, of the audio files on the particular project. So what I've seen some people do that want kind of a backup redundancy is to, you know, pick different folders. And I think that there are some software utilities that, you know, any file that gets saved to this particular folder can be duplicated to a different location or to a different hard disk, but Cubase will save the project to one particular folder at a time. If you have everything in a particular project and you save it and all your audio files are within the particular folder, you could do a backup project and that would, and then you could choose a different location where the project could be saved to, but it's not going to save your file to 2 locations at once. That could be problematic for a lot of people. All right, so we have Matt from London, Matt Elston. Thanks for checking in. All right, we're seeing Mandy Lane wants to get Cubase 12. All right, so we just see when Steinberg has Cubase 11 discount. So, you know, there are regular discounts throughout the year. So, you know, sometimes in the summer, there's usually a promotion that's been consistently running. So there was also a promotion, I think, for updates just last month. So, you know, there's different promotions. There's currently a New Year's promotion going on for Wavelab and Groove Agent full version going on. So different times of the year. Sorry, I had to use a different chat area today, so I may be navigating a little more. Okay. All right, so we see Richard James has made a live stream. All right, so it says, his question is, Greg, I seem to have lost my extensions, ARA access to Spectral Layers. Any thoughts on what I might have done and how to fix it? So if, you know, make sure, you know, sometimes if you come over here, if nothing is selected and we go to audio, extensions. If you don't see that directly there, if it's not active, it could be that you need to go to the actual something available to do an extension on before the function becomes active. So it needs something selected prior to doing that. If you don't see the extension here, you could, if you for some reason you go to your audio menu to extensions and nothing, and that's just kind of blank, you could try to just reinstall Spectral Layers and see if that does the trick. So we just see a question, when will you guys start talking about Cubase 12? So after it's released, otherwise it's just like a really bad tease. So we don't want to show you a bunch of stuff and get you excited if you can't use it. So. All right. So Greg, how do you go about saving Cubase Pro 11 projects to an external hard drive? So they're available once Cubase Pro 12 comes out. Also waiting on Mac Pro Minis, Mini Cube if they make it. Laughing out loud. So anytime that you save a project, and Steinberg's done a really good job of, like this kind of generation of Cubase, we'll call it, came out in 2002. So projects from 20 years ago can still be opened easily directly in Cubase 11. So I don't think we have anything to worry about migrating, opening up projects into, upcoming versions. So, so there shouldn't be a problem with that. And if you want it to save, and their question is how to save Cubase to an external drive. So the easiest way to do this is to just go to your file menu and choose backup project. And what this will allow you to do is just to would define a folder, and all the contents of that particular project would just go directly to your folders or to the drive you specify. But if you've been careful and you have everything within one particular folder, like you recorded all your audio files into the project folder, you could just come right over here to documents. Like for instance, I just have projects, and everything in this project here is in this folder. So once I've defined a project folder, when starting Cubase, I could just drag that folder to an external drive or to a backup, and all the contents needed to play back that particular project will do it. So when you do a new project, define a new folder, and everything should be automatically stored directly into your defined folder easily. All right, so we have Presidential Mav from South Africa joining us. So thanks for joining, being a part of the community. Okay, so I just see a question. When I use multiple tracks through Melodyne extension, they get out of sync. Although when I use only one track, no problem happens. So I don't have a copy. I don't have a Melodyne license to check that with. But if you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. So, one of the things, if you are doing, let's take a look. But let's say we go over here to Spectral Layer. Let's say if I go over into my ARA editing mode, you can now come over here and then, make sure that when you're doing this, that, there's also just an add event, so that you could, at this point, choose, to add multiple events here. So see if you're doing it that way. And also if you could tell us which version of Cubase you have, because there were some, differences in 11 that were introduced over 10.5. Okay, so I just see from Jack DeFleury, should I update Cubase 10.5 to 11? Honestly, is it worth it? So definitely. So, you know, there's like just for the frequency, EQ adding dynamics, the new batch processing, the new MIDI editing with global tracks, the scale, automatic scale correction and handling, plus upgrading to 11 now will get you the grace period update to version 12, so you can kind of sneak right into version 12 is when it's available. So it's definitely worth doing. It's a great update. Okay, so we see from John Costigan question, hello Greg, hope your family is well. We're all doing great, thanks for asking. I'm having trouble straightening out badly unmatched vocal harmonies in Very Audio. Any reminders? So I'm not sure if you're doing, if it's more of a rhythmic aspect or if it's more pitch, you know, so if we're doing kind of pitch, we just find a project here. Okay, so if we wanted to do, let's say we have background vocals, you know, so if it's going to be like, you know, editing the pitch. So let's say if I come over here to Very Audio, and I'll just make this larger so we can, you know, we can, you know, come over here and, you know, if, you know, once we want to go, you know, between different events, we could choose which is the active event. So, but, you know, and here we could, you know, choose to move, you know, based on our pitch snap mode to do that. So if it's pitch, it's pretty easy just to toggle back and forth. If it's something that's going to be more rhythmic, so let's say if I wanted to take this, and let me make sure I have my connection set up here so we could all hear. So let's say if it's more of a rhythmic thing that's unmatched, which is often when people are talking background vocals and unmatched, maybe it's so where we look at this and we go, okay, this is kind of rhythmically a bit off. At this point, we could go to the audio alignment, and I can say this one I want to be used as my reference. And I wanted to add these as my, so all of these as my targets. So basically I'm taking the timing of this and aligning the other ones to it. So that would allow you to now so we could have those kind of tightened up as opposed to something a little bit loose. So maybe, John, if you could let us know if it's pitch or rhythm. So, you know, while you can do some warping inside of the Very Audio, you might be better if it's a rhythmic aspect to use the audio alignment panel. Seeing other people confirming that the upgrade is worth it. All right, so great to see Kerwin Young on the live stream. He's just saying Steinberg wins over all DAW support. Thank you so much, Greg. Always look forward to these and look forward to having you on. So everyone Google Kerwin Young. Does great work. All right, so I just see a question. How is it possible to add one tact to the beginning of a Cubase project? So I'm not sure what tact is, but maybe a bar. So let's say if I have my project here and it's starting at bar 1, and if I'm misunderstanding, please just let me know in the comments. But if we come over here to the project, to project setup, you could also hit Shift S. We'll see display bar offset, and I'll say 1. So now when we do this, we can move all the events. Now everything, we have a 0 measure and then a measure 1. So we could add kind of negative time just by coming right over here to the project menu, to project setup, and do your display bar offset. So let me know if that's what you mean by tact, T-A-C-T. All right, so we have a question. When I press Z, it zooms vertically to a specific track. That's cool. If I press Z again, though, it brings every track down to the minimum zoom. How do I get it back to the previous zoom? All right, so let's say if I just come over here, I'm just going to activate the zoom tool. So let's say if I have this track selected and I hit Z. So now we come over here, now everything is kind of zoomed. So let's say if I just click in an empty space with the zoom tool, that you can go, this would be almost like your zoom undo. And I believe if we go to the edit menu, there is an undo zoom, which can be assigned to a keyboard shortcut, but you could also just grab the zoom tool. So again, if I come here, hit the letter Z, that track gets big. Now all tracks are minimized. I double click, and we're right back to where we were with our zoom state. So, or you could assign a keyboard shortcut under the zoom category to undo, redo, zoom. So give that a shot. Okay, so we just see, so when recording MIDI, they fall behind the beat. Is there any way to make timing more accurate? So if you could let us know what MIDI interface it is. Sometimes it could be dependent on if you have a lot of plugins that could be CPU, like latency heavy. The first thing I would try is just to adjust try to toggle the delay compensation here in the lower left-hand corner of the transport and see if that makes a difference. If we go to your studio setup, you know, it could be depending on your MIDI port that you're using, you know, so you may see some different functions there, but when you go to the audio system, I believe that there is even a record shift, but most of the time when I hear this, it's just going to be a delay compensation function. So try to disable delay constrain compensation or constrain delay compensation. All right, kind comment from Mark Rabin. Thanks for joining us today, Mark, and being part of the community. Okay, so we have a question on Spectral Layers. Can you talk about the difference in sensitivity levels and unmixing stems? Are they relative? Example, do you set one higher than the rest to get a better sound for that stem? So, it could be very contingent upon what particular, what the material is. So let's say, Okay, so let's say I will come over here and go to the Spectral Layers. And we'll go ahead and just launch this. All right, it doesn't want to seem to add the event. So, so when you're doing that and you have the sensitivity, the thing that I would do is, try to, let's see if I could just get this open just to kind of show this quickly. Is, like you could try to adjust the sensitivity layers for different things and see what results. It could really depend on the source material for that, but it's pretty magical with just the, with the default settings. Okay, just sorry, looking for my place in chat field jumped on me. Sorry about that. Okay, just finding my spot. Sorry for the delay. All right, so we have Volker checking in from near Frankfurt. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to have VCA or linked channels relink after a render in place creates new tracks? Currently, if you render tracks linked to VCA, new tracks don't get placed into the linked group. So it kind of makes sense because you're creating new tracks with that. So let's say if I come over here, but let's go ahead and try something. So let's say I want to take the two guitar parts here and let's link, we'll send these to a VCA. Okay, so now when we go to our mix console, we could see our VCA for our guitar part. So when we play, all right, so let's say if I wanted to render in place, and I'm just going to select the tracks themselves. So let's come over here to the render settings, and I'm going to remove the source tracks, because often when you do a render place, it's creating new tracks. So let's say if I render this, just see if we replace the tracks, if they maintain the channel routing. I don't think they will. Oh, sorry, let me just do that so that they're not mixed down. So you can see even here, it's just creating a new audio track. But we'll check to see what it does, if that then is routed to our VCA, which I don't inclined to say that it wouldn't be. Okay, so let's say yeah, so because what it's actually doing, it's creating new tracks to do that. So that's why it's not linked. I could pass that on as a feature request. But many times you may have to, you know, unless you're replacing the particular tracks, you know, you still have the existing tracks plus the new tracks. So, but I'll pass that along. But, you know, but it is creating new tracks, which is kind of why you see that work the way it does. Okay, so we have a question. Hello, Greg. Can you show me how to back up a project to another hard disk? So let's say I want to back up this project. I would just come right over here. So, you know, if everything is in the project folder, you could just drag, you know, all the audio files. And if you think that maybe you have a stray audio file that's in a different spot, if we come over here to the media menu, you could go to right click and say prepare archive, and that will move all of the audio files used in this and referenced in this particular project directly to directly to this folder, and you could back that folder up, or just come directly here, go to file menu to back up project, pick a new folder. So I'll just come here. And then at this point, you could give it a name. So it's going to be, you know, the new folder that you picked. It could be on your external drive. And then we could choose to minimize files if you want, to make direct offline processing permanent, and other options to minimize unused files. But that would be all you'd have to do, is just go to the backup project under the file menu. And then you could choose to, at that point, choose a different hard disk, and you could back up your projects that way. Okay, so we have a question from Peter K. Hi, Greg. When I add a group or effect, it also adds a folder. Can I add a folder? Can I add an effect without adding a folder? So all you have to do is, let's say if I wanted an effects track to go right under the selected track, you just say I want to add an effects channel track. So we'll come here, and this also works for groups. And you see this folder set up. So if I say create inside folder, that would place it at the bottom inside of our effects folder. If I choose to come right here and I choose create outside folder, now when I add the track, the effects channel track is not added to the folder. It's just added directly below the selected track. So once again, and you can do this for effects channels or groups or VCAs, you could just say on the folder setup, choose create outside folder, and then that will be placed directly below your the bottom selected track. All right, so we have Nick checking in from Essex in the UK. We have Mark Raven just saying, for those who do not have Groove Agent 5, now's the time. Get it. It's worth it. Best drum machine ever. So it is currently on sale and promotion. So I just see question why I received email Cubase Elements demo version. So, okay. So why I guess it says why I can't receive the Cubase Elements demo version. So, check a lot of times when the trial versions are sent out, it's actually kind of flagged by many systems as being kind of a spam email. So check your spam folder. Also, if you have done the trial version before on that email address, so they don't want people to necessarily, sometimes people will, run the trial version 5 or 6 times. So I think that there's a limit to how many times you could do it, a trial version for a particular version on a particular email. But, check your spam folder. And if not, you could email me at clubcubase at steinberg.de, and I could pass it on to the team, and they could make sure that everything is okay with your email address. All right, so we're just, Mark Raven's reminding people to hit the like button. So that's how we can continue to do these live streams. So we appreciate all support. Okay. Okay, so we have a question. Says, is there a workaround to create a gapless playback workflow? Currently, if I add a track via STI or add an insert while audio is playing, the audio stops for a moment. So there isn't a preference for that. And often what it's doing is, some programs, when you add different effects or you add an audio track, it is actually, when you're doing that, it'll play back the audio track out of time for a moment, if you have processing on it, because it hasn't done the delay compensation. So what Cubase is doing is actually, when it is doing that, it will play back the audio in time with the effect. So there isn't a preference to automatically turn that on or off. It's just kind of the design. So, and I know that the developers have had to request, and the product planning have had to request to, make that for a gapless audio engine. But they also want it to play back the way, to when you add an effect immediately to hear it in time. Okay, so we have a question. I have a full film imported to the timeline. How can I separate musical numbers, scenes in a way that when I change tempo does not affect anything that comes after? All right, so let's come over here. Let me just get a video file up. Okay, so, it could really, you probably just need to be able to set different elements. So what I would suggest is, maybe as you're working with different elements, if you didn't want them to respond to tempo changes, you could have them on, for MIDI tracks, you could have them on their own unique track. And you see this little mode here, which would be toggle time base. You have a musical time base and a linear time base. When you see the clock here, this would indicate that it's a linear time base. And as you make tempo changes, those events won't change time when the tempo changes. If it is set to musical mode, once we have musical mode, at that point, the tempo will change the position of the MIDI event. So try to come here and put the track itself. If it's for MIDI or on audio events, you could do it on audio, but you could just toggle the time base between those different tracks. All right, so we see Cedric on the live stream. All right. So it says, I'm considering switching to Pro Tools. Does Cubase support Dolby Atmos mixing? I'm attracted to control room and vocal alignment tools in Cubase. So currently Cubase doesn't. You know, there will be new versions of Cubase coming soon. So we don't know what features will be in there, but currently if you want to have the control room and vocal alignment tools and you need to do Atmos mixing, you can consider jumping up to Nuendo. And Nuendo actually has, you know, provisions for 714 buses. So a lot of people find that a much superior solution for working in Dolby Atmos than other solutions. So if you need to do that right away, check out Nuendo for that. All right, so we have Pascal checking in from Holland, and he just hopes that everyone will push the like button. So we see question, is it possible to assign a certain direct offline process action that I tend to use a lot to hotkeys or macros? Thanks in advance. So, you know, different functions you can have. So let me just jump back over to this project. You know, so there are, you know, depending on what you're doing in the direct offline processes, but if I wanted to come over here, let's say I just wanted to normalize the file. I wanted to do like, you know, typical processes. What you could do is if you go to the key commands, so let's say, okay, you could come over here. So let's say we'll go to our audio. Okay, so let's say you just wanted to go to, you know, if you wanted to process particular plugins, you could do that. And we could also just come over here. So let's say, we just look for. So under the process menu, all of these functions could be, you know, for the stereo offline processes, these could all be assigned with keyboard shortcuts. Now, when we look at a direct offline process, so let's say I wanted to come directly to these files and I go to my direct offline process, I could have different presets. So these presets, if we look at this, so let's say, okay, I just wanted, you know, this preset is now all of these particular functions. So let's come over here to our key commands. And then when we go to, you know, we could have favorite 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 through 9. So we could have these favorites automatically recallable or switch to different banks of favorites as well within the direct offline process. So if you find yourself doing this all the time, just simply come right over here and just do a direct offline process. You could save it as favorites and switch between different banks of favorites using keyboard shortcuts as well. So you can configure almost all those, you know, 36 different presets that are user created just directly from that, or individual, like, you know, normalize, reverse, those functions can all be set up with keyboard shortcuts as well. All right, so we see from Sven, I stumbled across a Yamaha item called Vst Rack Pro. What can you tell us about that? Can it be used as an alternative to VEP to run plugins on a slave computer? So I think we discussed this in the last live stream, but basically what it is, it's going to allow you to access VST plugins through, I think it's a RUIO 16, which is a USB and Dante interface. So it's not, I don't believe it's going to be intended to host virtual instruments and transmit MIDI. It's really a way for live sound engineers, like if you run a Yamaha Rivage console or QLCL, to be able to access software-based plugins through Dante. So, but it's not intended to be a virtual instrument host. I don't have a license. I'm trying to get a license to kind of check it out. So, all right. We'll see. Just see a comment just about kind of further expansion. It says along those lines, I got a 12 mic to add to my Army UFX2, which only has ADAT, no MADI. So if I want 96K, I can't use all my mic inputs unless there is a way in Cubase to make the 12 mic in aggregate. So, within the Mac OS, if you go to the audio MIDI setup utility, at that point you could set up an aggregate device, but realize that when you do set up an aggregate device that you are compounding, you're, basically doubling the latency of all of the interfaces. So that could be problematic as well. So it's not really so much a Cubase function, but again, just getting, the proper clock synchronization between that. But, if you have enough, ADAT inputs, you should be able to use that. All right, so we just see a question. Can we please include exporting stems in Elements? So I'll pass that along as a feature request. I don't see that would be coming into the Elements at a $99 level, because it does take a tremendous amount of time to incorporate all the different functions. And with that, so usually in a $99 price point, you may not see exporting stems like a batch export. You could obviously do like one track at a time in Cubase Elements, but consider jumping up to Cubase Pro for that. Okay, so Mark Raven just says 82 people watching at 42 likes. Please hit the like button. All right. All right, so we have Canada checking in. All right, so it says just going on further with the 12 pre, so it says at 96K can't use all 12 inputs. You'd have to drop down to 48K. So someone's asking me if Cubase can use the 12 mic as an aggregate like Pro Tools can. All new to me. So it would function the same way. It's so if you're using an aggregate device, it's just done through Mac OS. So Cubase and other programs would utilize it the same way. All right. All right, so we see Michael Teams has already had his revelation of the day with the audio alignment. Says he wish he had it last night. Re-sang 4 tracks to align to starts. So you did have it last night, but now you know about it. So. So we have a question. Is there a way to scroll left and right in the mixer with the Mackie control? Well, any other hardware. So, you know, a lot of times I don't have a Mackie control, but like I have a CC121 just sitting on my desk. So let's say if I'm in the mix console, I could just come right over here and I could scroll. And if I wanted to add just a bunch of audio tracks here, just so we could scroll farther across. So bear with me just for a second. So, so I'm just kind of, so I could kind of scroll just using my CC121. So there's a number of different control surfaces that allow you to do it. So you might be able to, if you have a Mackie control, you know, and some of its protocols are limited, but you could probably take one of these and just say under navigate, you know, and then just use bottom or down. And then maybe for F2, choose navigate up, you know, so you could do, not add up, but just to up. So at this point, you could just use 2 different functions, and that would allow you to kind of navigate left and right in the mix console. So that should do it if you don't have those assigned. All right. It's great to see that Michael Teams from Weatherford is present on the live stream. All right, so we have FJ Segovia checking in again from Madrid. Thanks for joining us. So you see Michael Pierce just saying, oh, Greg, so nearly clicked on Beatles and Stones. I'll pull it out for some demonstration today, just because everyone loves that song. So I can't wait to hear Sable Winter's version of it. All right, so my chat field just jumped on me. All right, so we have Ante, I believe we're checking in from Croatia. Thanks for joining us. We have Charles K checking in from the UK. All right, and we have Crocant from California checking in, and Kevin from Arizona. All right, and we have Masad, I believe, checking in from Iran. Thanks for joining us today, being part of the community. All right, so a question. Hi, Greg. If I record a mono mic track, shouldn't I be able to pan it left and right? So let's say if I have a mono track here, so it, you know, when we go to, let me just go to a different project that doesn't have, I'll play something from Hot Mess here. So let's say I have my mono bass recording here. So just make sure that, you know, when we have our mono track, so this is Michael Teams and Gareth and Pablo. They let me play bass, but let's say if I go to my bass track here, so as soon as I have this, I can. Now, if this is routed to a mono output, then you don't see the panner. Or if it's being routed to, so the ability of not seeing an output is often when the routing is set up here. Now, if you have a mono track that's being sent to a stereo output, then that would allow you to pan. But if and sometimes people go, okay, now I don't hear the panning that I do. So let's say if I add a group channel to my bass, and if the group channel is set to mono, so now I could pan. So this destination is to the group, and now the group I could pan. So it's really contingent, probably, that your track is being sent to a mono destination, not that it's a mono track. So make sure that you have this. So you'll notice that as soon as I come over here, I set this to a stereo output, that our panning becomes immediately accessible. So try that. Okay, just reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we see Mike just indicating buying Cubase 11 when it was on sale months ago is one of the best decisions I made in a long time after a 10-year hiatus because of bugs and frustration, and made making music fun for me again. So, and the question is, can you give us spoilers about what's new in 12? So the only things that have been shared, and I'm realize that I could be under non-disclosure agreement, would be that, you know, it will utilize the new licensing system, which you could check out in Dorico, or if you wanted to get the free version of Dorico SE just to experience it, and that it will be Mac M1 native. So. We see Michael Pierce is already coming up with his soup flavors, so always enjoyable to read Michael Pierce's soups and Michael Team's creative ice cream flavors. So we just see, is it possible to automate the inserts in the control room? You know, so a lot of times, you know, we could control the parameters of the inserts using, like, you know, quick control. So if you wanted to come over here, let's say if I add an audio track and I wanted to come here, let's say I go to my quick controls and I'll click on L. So let's say if I go to my inserts here, and I wanted to control a particular parameter, I could say, okay, let's go to the frequency EQ, and I'm just going to adjust one knob here. So let's say I just wanted to do like my peak EQ, that I can now control this directly from, you know, I could remotely control things here. Now, the problem gets to be that the control room doesn't actually have any correlation. It doesn't reside anywhere on the project window where automation lives. So if I, you know, here I have my bass track and I can see my time, exactly the automation going on here. But there's no home for plugins here. So that's why often you don't see like an area to automate them, because, you know, it is not part of the project. It's kind of separate from the project. So there's no container necessarily for the automation. But if you needed to control different parameters, you could use quick controls to do that. All right, so we have Razel checking in from Denmark. Thanks for joining us. Great to see you on the live stream today. All right, so we just see a question. I've never understood what the control room is for and never felt the need to insist on digging. Am I missing out? So yeah, there's a lot of great things that could be offered in the control room. So I will come over here and let's say, you know, I want it to, you know, so the first thing is a lot of people, you know, one of the intentions, and we see this on large format consoles, is you'll have kind of a master output here. And many people, since you know, connect the outputs, the audio outputs of their audio interface to powered speakers, would use their master fader as a monitoring, like the level going to our speakers. So that, you know, whether we're going to be louder or softer. Now, the problem is if you have the gain structure set to your mixer, you know, to your speakers, maybe cranked up, and your control room, your master fader is here. When you go to export a mix, you know, you're telling it to drop, you know, the volume by minus 27.1 dB. So really what you want is to get as much gain structure out of your main mix as possible, because when you export, it goes through this signal path. But if I wanted to listen to it at a quieter level, I could decouple the monitoring volume from the gain structure of the mix. So as I'm playing this, if we look at my master faders here, it's not affected. So this is just our monitoring phase. Now, we could also, if we have more than one pair of monitors, like we could come over here, like I have, you know, Oratones, I have NHTs, I have events, I have Yamahas in my particular setup in my home studio. So I could come over here and I could connect the monitors, and we define these out of our audio connections. We'll go to our control room, and I could have 4 different monitors going out of my audio interface. So if I wanted to switch from my Yamaha to my JBL to my Genelec to my Oratones, I could just come right here and switch monitors without having to have a piece of hardware, which ultimately colors the sound. So when we want it to come over here, I'll just collapse this down. Let's say we go to our inserts. At this point, we could have different processing on our monitors, but we could also have different levels. So when we switch between different speakers, we could actually switch and have consistent volume levels. Plus, we could EQ our monitors or apply processing on monitors if needed. There's also dedicated inserts on the control room as well. So many times people will have like some running, I think a tool a lot of people will run is SonarWorks, which will kind of take like an EQ snapshot of your room and do corrective EQ. So when we work with corrective EQ, that's compensating for not deficiencies in the project, but deficiencies in the monitoring environment. So many people would put a room correction processing directly on the master fader, and then when they go to export, all of their deficiencies of their room have now been applied to the exported file, usually unwanted. So if we run processing in our control room, at this point we have the option to, you know, not worry about exporting the file because it's just going through the monitoring path. So again, having this decoupled monitoring path, you know, and we could also just very easily, like while we're playing, I could say, okay, we'll play this. I just wanted to so let's say if I just wanted to come over here, we could, you know, have different external inputs. So if you wanted to have that as a reference, but, you know, we could choose to also at this point, you know, at this point, if we wanted to also have something called a listen bus. So let's say if I wanted to listen to the bass in context, you know, a lot of times we get solo tracks. But if I click on L, I could bring that track out and we could set this into main monitoring levels is something called a listen bus. So when we wanted to come over here, we could say, okay, let's go to our main area. So now I can hear the other tracks. Instead of them all being soloed, they're just dimmed. And if I wanted to listen to this in different downmix presets, see, okay, I wanted to hear this in mono. So there's a lot of great things that go through the control room. Also, like when you audition different loops, so before they actually, you know, exist in a project, you could come over here and just audition your different loops and have that through the control room. So there's a lot of great functionality if you're not using the control room and you have it that you could utilize with it. Okay, going through different questions. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so I just see a question. What happens in this stream? So, you know, these live streams, what we do is we just, people ask questions and we answer them. So you can find answers for all the problems or solutions, and you could learn from other people's questions as well. All right, wonderful to see Captenergy Music on the live stream as well. Thanks for joining us today. All right, just seeing some different discussions of compressors like distressors and LA2As. Okay, going through the discussions. Thanks for all the great comments and questions. All right, we see Uno Mementos greeting everyone from his sauna. So gives everyone 1 pint. So he's from Finland. All right, so we have Ranjit from India joining us. Thanks for being on the live stream today. So we see from Matt Elder is the frequency EQ resizable. So I think it's going to be fixed. So when we come over here, let's just look at the inserts. I think so it's kind of fixed in this way. It could work on, you know, it's kind of set up to work best on different screen resolutions. So, but it's going to be a fixed size for the GUI. All right, so we see from Michael Romanowski from Coast Mastering. All right, so it says, hey, Greg, could you talk a little bit about track versions and uses for them? All right, so let's say I've done a number of different edits on this particular file here. So let's say, and I'll just make this a little bigger. So, you know, what a track version is, it's kind of an alternate version where we could switch between different takes. So let's say if I'm here and I've now kind of painstakingly slipped audio here, and I've gone through like every single little edit. Let's say I've just done, you know, a myriad of crossfades, and okay, so now I do this, and I want this event to start here, and let's do this. So I've done a number of different edits. And sometimes you may want to have access to all your edits, but sometimes you may just want to have this rendered as a quick file. So one of the things that I do a lot is I will duplicate the track version. And at this point, I will say, just to simplify, like so I don't accidentally move something. So let's say I do a bounce selection, I replace this. Now someone's like, oh, I really didn't like the particular edit you did. And like, oh, I rendered this file. And I can now just jump right back to my particular track versions here like this. When tracking a multi-track band, I will also tend to use track versions for that as well. So let's say I was recording a number of different sources. So let's say I got 12 channels of a live group. So we're tracking drums, bass, guitar. So I come over here and let's say, okay, we're just recording. All right, and we can say, okay, that was take 1. So now what I could do is, while these are all selected, I can say, let's do new version. Let's do take 2. So I will just come here. Okay, and now let's go to, you know, we'll select all these. And so if I wanted to now go to take 1 for these tracks and take 2, or let's say I just have this one and I really want to take 1 on this particular track and take 1 on that track. So you could have kind of a different way of having alternate sources. So I find it very creative to, as you've done a lot of edits, you know, even with very audio, you know, I will often come over here and let's say we'll open up Beatles and Stones upon request here. So, you know, I like using the duplicate track version. So if I always needed to get back quickly to the original source, like sometimes we can go down an editing rabbit hole where all of a sudden it's like, oh, you know, I just went too far. And then, you know, and you just want to start all over again. But maybe you've done other edits in the meantime. So I would come over here and say duplicate version, and let's say I'll render this to create a separate audio file. So just say bounce selection, replace, and now I could do all of my very audio edits here. So let's just say, okay, we're gonna activate our very audio, and let's say, okay, as we're listening to it, you raise that.
Laid out on the floor, I've got to choose what's mine and what's yours. 'Cause now you're asking.
So if I've done all of these like horrific,
Something about it
so let's say I'll do very audio editing here, and I play it for the client, and let's say I just moved all those down. So let's say, oh, I'm a genius, and
something about it just sounds so wrong.
so let's say you just totally messed up and you saved. You could always just go back to the original version, and now as we do this, I get the chorus. So I could, again, just switch to a different track version. So again, it's having kind of alternate versions of the same material. I don't have to duplicate. I don't have to duplicate processing. All of it's just the media that's on here will be preserved, and that way you could have different takes, you know, or different edit versions. You know, so if you're like, you know, like when I was recently doing some session work on bass, and I would just, if I really liked a particular take, I would save that, I would do a new track version, do another take. And when I liked it, I would just duplicate versions, and then I could pick and choose between different edits. And it's very convenient to switch across multiple tracks. So sometimes if I'm doing a single part, like a guitar solo or a vocal, I'll use lanes. But if I'm doing like a whole band, and they want it, oh, you know, I want to hear take 2, I want to hear take 3, I need to hear take 14, you know, with track versions, they could all be selected, and just kind of one mouse click, you could switch between those different versions. Great to see you, Michael, on the live stream. Hope you're doing well. All right, so we have a question. Can you demo setting up a rack instrument with multiple MIDI tracks and then use the export selected tracks function? When I do this and import to a new session, it doesn't save all of my settings. Okay, so let's say I will come over here. So we'll have an external instrument. So let's say if I go to my external instrument here, let's say I'll have a montage. At this point, I could say this is connected into these particular inputs. So I wanted to add 2 instrument tracks, and let's put these on montage. Okay, so and basically setting up an external instrument here on the montage would allow us to take would allow us to take these, you know, the audio outputs of the keyboard or drum machine or external instrument and connect it to defined inputs on our audio interface. So once we have this, I don't have a keyboard hooked up to my system. So let's say if we have MIDI data here, and let's move that there. So now once you do this, so if you're doing multiple tracks, so we could separate these on MIDI channel 1 and MIDI channel 2. So that should sound out Now because if we have everything set up with one input, you realize that if we do a render in place for that one instrument, that it could send the same audio. It may send, I haven't tried it with multi-timbral, but I believe it may just define it here based on the actual MIDI channel. So let's come over here. All right, so it looks like the montage is already kind of in use. So you may have to, within the audio connections for the external instrument, if you wanted to use it multi-timbrally, you may have to define all of your different outputs. You could define multiple outputs from the instrument to inputs, or at the end, if you wanted to then render it all together, you could also, instead of putting it on a particular MIDI channel, put it onto MIDI channel any, and all the different MIDI channel messages, all the different MIDI messages with their channels will then be sent, and you could kind of render as a stereo file that way. All right, so just saying from Michael, it says, I have an external monitor controller. I don't need the control room. However, I really miss and need to have the ability to solo FX without source, but I can't do that without a control room. Bummer. So, you know, you don't necessarily have to. You could use a control room as kind of your monitoring path and still use your external controller. So, and one of the points that I should have mentioned, let's say if I wanted to listen to like this vocal here.
I was so naive. Now you're packing boxes, ready to leave.
So let's say I just wanted to hear the reverb.
Musical history.
I'll just accentuate it a little more. All right, so now when I go to the mix console, so I really don't have to switch anything here. I could just route it through the control room. So, you know, once we come up to our, so let's say as we're playing along here, and if I wanted to solo the reverb, I hear the source track is soloed as well. So when I come here, that will solo that. But if I use the listen bus, now I only hear this particular reverb isolated without it soloing the other sources. So you could you could activate the control room, leave it at 0 dB, Michael, if you want, and still, you know, use your monitor controller for all of the levels without, you know, without any penalty really, and you will get the ability to solo and isolate the reverb with the listen bus. So let me know if that doesn't work for you for some reason. Okay, so we have a question. Is it possible to bind a physical hotkey, not the scroll wheel plus modifier key combination that already exists, to left and right scroll on the project? All right, so if we come here, we can hold down the shift key and do kind of left and right scroll. So we could do this. Let's see if we can. Let's see if there's a key command for this. All right, so that left and right arrow moves the playhead. So I don't know of a key command. Let me just take a look. I think it would be under navigation, but I know that I think you could do it in the Yamaha Nuage, but let me just see. But it may just simulate. Just take a quick look, see if there's anywhere else that it might be under. Yeah, so I don't know of a hotkey to just kind of navigate kind of the project window other than just holding down the shift key while you scroll. But I'll pass that along. And if you want to email me, I can see if I could play around with some more options and modifier keys, but I don't know of one. Sorry about that. All right, we see Jeff Zabelski from Chico, California. All right, so we see Judy just says, I upgraded from Artist 10 to Pro 11. How do I insert into Pro 11 the Spectral Layers and Halion Sonic SE? So if you know, these are separate downloads from the, if we go to the Steinberg Download Assistant. So make sure that first, when we go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, I'll just get this opened. All right, so the first thing you want to do is, like, when you go to your Cubase Pro 11, make sure that you have installed Spectral Layers 1 and that you've installed like Halion Sonic SE plus the Halion Sonic SE 3 content. So make sure that those are installed. Once they are installed, to access like Halion Sonic SE, you would go to like add track and add instrument, and you'll see it under synth. So you may see the synth category kind of closed, but you should see the Halion Sonic SE there. So you could add it just like that. To add Spectral Layers to your project, you would select an audio event, come over here, and you would see it as an extension. So then you could just go to here to your Spectral Layers, and now we could just see it show up in the bottom zone for editing. So give that a try. So make sure first that you do have them installed, Judy. All right, so let me just, sorry, my chat field is migrating up and down on me today. Okay, so question from Matt Elder. Will Steinberg ever start selling the CC121 again? I foolishly sold mine a couple years ago. So right now there's, you know, part supplies issues with that, which is why it was discontinued. So it's actually selling quite well, but the parts became unavailable during pandemic, like many other computer components. So that's why it's currently not available. So I haven't heard of any plans to re-release it. It's just recently been discontinued with that. But I'm sure there are some that are available secondhand. Okay, so we just see question. Hi, Greg. Maybe a too simple question, but how can I get the track colors aspect I see in your tracks? Mine are more transparent, less lively. So, I really just kind of, I think when a lot of people kind of like in the mix console, this would be a quick preference that you could set. So if you go to preferences and under user interface, you'll see tracks and mix console channel colors. And at that point, you could choose to, so you'll see mix console channels. When I click apply, then it'll be kind of very monotone in colors, but now I could apply the track colors. And as far as track colors go, I actually, I think, what I do is, like here, these are just the standard 12 track colors. So it's really, these are all standard colors. So I see a lot of people, maybe not utilizing colors, and we could do this as, we could set a preference to automatically. So in that same area, that same preference under user preferences to user interface, track and mix console channel colors, you could say, use previous track color +1, and that will assign track colors for you automatically that you can change. But really everything I'm doing is standard. You may have to turn on the track colors for the mix console, but everything else should, that I'm utilizing here, like in this project, is standard colors and default. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to have the Q link on a separate button that will not latch, so I need to keep it pressed while I turn off when I release it? All right, so Q link, so if we're here, I could just come right over here. So if I hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, we could turn on Q link. So let's just see. And that will be activated. And like when you do that, Alt plus Shift, that will be activated there until you release. And as soon as you release, then so that if you needed to just say, okay, I just want to take, these channels here, and I just needed to move all those, we could choose to do it quite easily just with that activating the Q link. I'll take a look. I know if you click with the mouse that you could do that, but let's see if there's another key command so that it's will not just immediately disable when you release. All right, so if we get a Q link here, let's say I'll just set it up as a keyboard shortcut. Let's see if I do. All right, sorry about that. I think I may have quick Cubase setting up my keyboard shortcut. Let me just try a different one here. Okay, so let's come over here to Q link. Let's see if all right, so I'll assign that keyboard shortcut to it. And let's say if yeah, so it's a keyboard shortcut that you can assign just by going, looking for Q link, and then that keyboard shortcut will keep it enabled and disabled. Or if you hold down Alt plus Shift or Alt/Option plus Shift, at that point, it will just be temporary until you let go. So thanks for the great question. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, what's the best and easiest procedure to convert when recording in high resolution but exporting to video requiring 44.1 or 48K? So I think the best method to do that is probably just when you go to the export, when you go to export video, I believe that it will just automatically place it at 48K for you. You could do like an export audio mix down, and if you wanted to automatically, switch it to a different audio file format. But I believe if you just do the export video at the final stage, that will automatically, or when you do your export audio mix down, if you're marrying it in a different video editor, at that point, you could just set the sample rate directly here, and that will export. But I would kind of keep the project at full resolution, and then when you go to export, you could choose the desired bit depth and sample rate there. All right, so we have Lancashire Aussie Boy 64 checking in from Lancashire in England. Thanks for joining us. So a question from Jorge just says, how can I phase invert in the channel track with my CC121 function keys? Okay, so let's say we'll take a look at my CC121 here. So we'll get to studio setup. And let's go to the CC121. So now, so if we wanted to come here, so now when I have an audio file selected, we'll see my phase. I have button 1. Then, so I just went directly to studio setup. We go select a CC121 on the left-hand side, and we go to function 1 under audio, and then you'll see invert phase on and off. So as I select the file here, I could just invert the phase just like that. So that's all you have to do. You can also assign it to keyboard foot switch if you want. All right, so I just see, hi Greg from Sweden, question. How do I get the voicing to follow from chord pad to chord track if I drag and drop? All right, so when we drag, let's say, I'll just come over here. Let's say, we could think of often when we have the chord pads here, that we could set these up, let's say, okay, so let's say now we'll take this and so when we look at our chord pad here, when we look at the chord track, so let's say we'll look at the voices here that are kind of laid out. So, okay, I'll make this just a little bigger so we could see kind of our chord voices. So, you know, often, let's go back to the chord pad and we'll switch. So you see that when we have, as I just adjusted the, so, you know, what I did is I just went to the chord pads here and I just adjusted the voicing. And then as soon as I adjusted the voicing, so let's say if I adjust the voicing again here and drag this over. So now I will look at all three of these parts. I'll just glue them together quickly. We'll see that they each have different voices. So so that way the voicing from the chord pad itself was taken into account when dragged. So it seems like that kind of worked as expected. Let me know if that doesn't work for you. All right, and this may have been kind of a follow-up to our colors question. It says, thanks, I will look into that because I'm using a preset with lots of colors prepared by a colleague. Maybe I'm stuck because of the preset. So, you know, if you wanted to change the color presets, you just go to the project color presets. And if you come over here, you can say, you know, I wanted to have I want to have 8 colors. I wanted to have 16 colors or 32 colors, and I could also have number of basic colors be 32 but 4 color tints. So you could just kind of change you know, these colors, you know, very easily. So if you just wanted to experiment with different color schemes, you could do that quite easily, again, by going to your project menu to project colors setup. Okay, so we have a question from Peter. Just says, forgive me if this question has been asked ad nauseum. Kindly go over the benefit of using a VCA fader. So no problem. We'll just be happy to answer any questions that you have. So we just look for the particular project I was thinking of. Okay, where VCAs can really make a difference is especially when using a lot of... So let's say if I look at my mix console, and on my drums here, I have lots of automation, existing automation, kind of going in contrary motion, where as we do this, you know, some tracks are going up and some are going down. So what I want to do is to assign these tracks here to a VCA. So we're going to say add VCA fader to selected channels. Now VCA faders don't sum the audio. A group, I could now take the drums and compress the drums as a single entity. But sometimes if I have my snare going on and I wanted to have more, let's say, reverb on this snare, So often when I adjust a level going to a group, that would affect the signal flow going to my snare. So that could drop this amount of the level going to the snare. So now when I do this, I could bring the VCA down, and that doesn't affect the gain relationship on my sends. So we see my automation going on. I could bring the automation, my VCA fader down, and it's just basically attenuating or expanding the automation depending on if it's going in a contrary or congruent motion with the VCA fader. So I move the VCA fader down, but you still see the faders going up and down. And as I bring the VCA fader up, I could still maintain all of the automation contours, but have it attenuated. Now, if I choose to automate the VCA, I could now, as I go to edit, so that's not changing the gain structure of the snare going into. So as I bring it down, the level, the relationship between the send isn't affected when using the VCA. So now I've done all this like automation. You may just come over here and say, okay, as we look at our automation, so I automate that, we could just look at our different tracks, and if we see the automation, we could choose to, you know, combine the automation of the particular files with the VCA automatically selected. So if you have a lot of existing automation, you know, that's when VCA faders will make a lot of sense, because it will maintain the existing automation relationship and not affect the gain structure of sends. If you want to like smash the drums and do parallel processing, that's when you could use groups. And you could use groups and VCA simultaneously without penalty. All right, so I just see a question from Jess Sabelski. Greg, on video export, Nuendo allows matching the frame rate, but not the sample rate down to 48K. So I believe that sample rate's automatically exported into video at 48K, because that's kind of the standard for video. Okay, so we have Mahari from Arlington, Virginia. So I'm in Alexandria, so you're really close to me. So the question is, how can I transfer my song from Yamaha PSR X900 as an audio file to Cubase or any DAW? So I don't think that the PSR SX900 has a way of rendering the audio file. So probably what you need to do is, you know, hit play in Cubase, connect the audio outputs of the PSR SX900 into inputs on your audio interface, and at that point just, you know, record the you know, add a stereo audio track in Cubase and then record the audio. So so it's not as integrated as working with a virtual instrument. All right, so Greg, can you show how to get rid of clicks in a track? Sounds like static electricity pops every now and then. So a lot of times what you could do, if you're working, you know, with, if you find that there are like clicks that have been recorded, like maybe a clocking issue. So let's say if I'm in the sample editor, you know, you could kind of zoom in down to like the sample level, and then you'll see, like, let's say you see something like this is often kind of what a pop or a click would look like. So you could just grab the pencil tool and then often just kind of redraw the pop or click out. You could also, if you have, you know, if you're utilizing, you know, if you have Spectral Layers Pro, you know, you could, I don't think that the Spectral Layers 1 that comes with Cubase, that the OEM version will do that. But if you have Spectral Layers Pro, that has declicking as well. So check out some of those options. But the pencil tool, you may get a message. A lot of people, you know, grab their pencil tool and they get a message like, please to, you know, zoom to a resolution that's lower. So at this point, you could just now kind of draw out pops or clicks using the pencil tool in the sample editor. So that's a pretty effective way. Okay, so we see back to the track versions. Is there a way to blend two versions if you like some of the new change but want to keep some of the original? Thanks. Okay, so let's take a look. Okay, so I'll just add okay, so I'll just do a quick kind of fake recording. Okay, so I want to combine different track versions. All right, so let's say at this point, let's colorize these. Red. All right, so now I want to do a new track version. Okay, and let's see if we colorize these different. Okay, so when I come over here and I want to use part of track version 1, so I can say, okay, now we'll see our red, and then when we go to track version 2, we'll see yellow. So what I want to do is to just do a new version. So we'll say this is version 3. I'll come over here to version 1 and say, okay, we'll do a global copy here. So let's say I'll just copy. Let's go to track version 3. And now what I could do is actually just say paste at origin. All right, and let's go to version 2 for all of them. Sorry about that. All right, and I want it copy, switch to version 3. And then again, you could just kind of paste it, but if you just want to paste time at origin, that would automatically just kind of paste. And then you could have different track versions kind of all together. So now if I wanted to switch to track version 1, my edit, let's say my track version 2, and now I want to go to track version 3, which is a combination of them. We could just come right over there and just combine that way. So you could combine multiple track versions. So it's pretty slick. All right, so we just see how to comp 2 tracks at the same time. For example, a DI bass track and an amp bass track playing the same part. All right, so we could use track versions for that, but let's go ahead and take a look. So I think I have a comping here that we could open up. Thanks for all the great questions today. If you learned something new, make sure you do hit the like button. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that as well. Okay, so let's say I will go ahead and we'll just call this bass DI. And we will, let's say we'll duplicate this track just for demonstration purposes. And we'll call this one mic. Okay, so we'll just come here. Let's open up the lanes. On both of them, I'll lose this. All right, and let's see if I grab the comp tool, if that's... So, you know, with this, you may have to, let's say if I put these, let's see if I do it in group edits, if that makes a difference. So if you place them into a folder track and enable group edits, you can come right over here. And as we do the edits between the two, the tracks, the comps would automatically carry over. But you have to make sure that in the folder track that you have it group editing turned on. So place the DI and the bass amp and the mic tracks into a folder, enable groups, and then you could, as you make changes on one, it will automatically reflect onto the other part for you. Okay, Michael Teams wants people to whack the like button. See, Jazz Dude's done some moderation, keep stuff on topic. Thank you for that. All right, so we see Michael Teams has granted me and my family and myself 1 gallon of blackberries and cream ice cream. So I'll tell my son that I ate it all, so he'll be jealous. All right, so I just see question, I need help mixing vocals on Cubase 11 Pro. So, you know, it could really, it's, you know, it's kind of a vague question. So it's, if there's a particular aspect of mixing vocals, you know, but, you know, mixing could be done on, you know, could be different on every particular project. I could show you a vocal chain that I kind of set up for a project that a lot of people seem to like. And let's say in this Beatles and Stones one that I created, you know, probably just a little bit of, you know, sometimes, you know, with getting stuff set up correctly, you know, getting a right microphone, you know, it's always kind of, when you have a great vocalist, stuff, you know, mysteriously sounds better automatically. You know, I remember talking with engineer Ed Cherney once, you know, and he's done people like, you know, Rolling Stones and stuff like that. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes I ever heard from Ed was, you know, my engineering got so much better when I worked with better bands, you know. But I'll just show you a little bit kind of what I have on this vocal chain. So I did a little bit of roll in. I have, you know, just a bit of compression. So just very slight compression. I have a little bump EQ wise. And I did some EQ roll off and a little bit of reverb. So for like, so if I just bypassed. Something about that just sounds so wrong. So now with the compression added. And let's add a little, let's go to the EQ and we'll do the roll off and a little high end bump. Just leave it alone. And then just a little bit of the reverb. You used to love when I played Hey Jude. But, you know, if I was mixing a different song, it could be different EQ frequencies, different amounts of compression, depending on the recording. So it's kind of, you know, a tough question to answer. But, you know, hopefully that could get you started. You know, and try checking out, you know, try removing frequencies that are, you know, unclear. So start maybe removing frequencies first in your EQ. And that would be a good place to start. We see John Koskins recommending Bobby Huff video about mixing vocals in Cubase. So enjoy his production videos where he kind of takes apart classic songs and shows you how to make like Def Leppard drums and stuff like that. I believe he's the one. All right, so you see, is there a way to make event the system default instead of grid? So let's say if we choose this to event here, I'll just do a new project and I'll see if we save it as a template, if it's automatically preserved in a template setting. So let me just come here. I'll just save this as a template with events saved here. So we'll just come over here, save as template. Okay, so I'll close this project and we'll do a new project and utilize the template we just created and see if it carries over. So now the grid is set to events. So let's say I'll just check here to make sure it's not. So yeah, it's preserved within a template, Michael. So if you want that as your default state, you could save it as a template and that will be preserved so that your snap will go to events instead. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Okay, so we have a question. Is there a way to get the loop cycle to follow the part selection in the editor window? Okay, so let's see. I'm not sure if this is for MIDI or audio, but we'll try for both. right, so let's say if I'm here, so I know we could do with the range selection. Yeah, I don't know a way to automatically have, I think if you hit P to do that, so it's not automatic, but if we're in a particular range, you could hit the letter P, and that will set the locators based on the particular range. If you use the range tool, so we could come over here and say cycle follows range selection. So right now, if I use my range tool, we could have kind of this cycle automatically follow the particular range selection. But let me just, so you could do that, or just by selecting it and hitting P for like parts to locator or so, but not automatically. But there is the preference for that. Let me just activate the project here real quick. So with that preference, and if you have the cycle set, you could have this automatically follow. And if you do it within, you know, just as you select with the range selection tool, you could do that. And if you have one part selected here, hit the letter P, and that'll do it. But I don't know a way to make it automatically follow that. Once again, thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we just see, hi Greg, question. Is there a way of moving a section of the whole project over to allow me to extend the section before that? I hope this makes sense. Okay, so let's say if I have, like I wanted to add, so if we used a range selection here, so let's say I needed to add 8 bars in the middle of this project. I'm just gonna hold down, I think it's Alt Shift. Just set the range here, get the right. All right, so if you hold down Control or Command plus Shift, let's say I needed to insert silence here, and I need it to be this long. So you want to define the length with the range tool, and then we go to Edit to Range, just try to insert silence, and then that will move everything over for you and give you space between the song and not just at the beginning. So let me know if that works for you. So again, set the length that you want, and you could globally select. You could do this on tracks individually, but if you hold down Control or Command plus Shift and use the range tool, we could set the length of the space that you want to add, to edit, to range, and then to insert silence. And so let me know if that works for your needs. All right, so we see Jeff Sabelsky's working on his Oboe Reeds YouTube videos done using Nuendo. All right, so we just see Greg on the video export. It's highlighted in red that the sample rates don't match. All right, so let's... just import a quick video file. Okay, so... Okay, so I think that we look at this, that this particular file is going to be... All right, so this is 44.1. So let's say if I wanted to export video now. Okay, so let's see if I need to take the project. So once I take this particular video file here, I will, let's get to the pool window, and I just take this one file and I'll just do convert files. So let's keep the sample rate. And just make sure we have the right video file here. All right, and you may have to, I'll just come to the project setup because it's probably just a frame rate message. We'll get from the video. So now I'll just try the 44.1 file first. Again. All right, so it looks like at that point it should just automatically export without files. So check to make sure that you have a frame rate is set, Jeff, and then you could come over here to your project setup, hit Shift S or go to project setup, and automatically get the frame rate from the video. So let me know if that works. So just see the last hint was epic, by the way. Thanks, Greg. So don't remember what it was. It was probably 25, 30 minutes ago. So, but I'm glad you liked it. Okay, so we see a question. Hey, Greg, how can I render and place audio clips that have different effects applied to them and bounce all of it without losing tail? It would be useful to just bounce the loop length worth of the track. So, you know, if you're doing a render in place, so all you have to do is, you know, once you go to the render in place, you get to the render settings. Here you could add a tail for that. So you could just choose to add tail in seconds or bars and beats. So if you wanted 1 measure of tail or 15 seconds of tail, you could just set it directly there. So let me know if that works for you, Mike. Okay. All right. So we see a question. Sorry for multiple questions. Could you please explain the difference between hit points and warp markers? Okay. So let's come over here. Okay, so let's say I have my loop here. All right, so as you record audio into Cubase, Cubase will automatically, once we're in the sample editor and we go to hit points, we'll see kind of the rhythmically significant points of the audio determined. So now when I wanted to come over here, we could see these hit points, and these hit points are going to be, you know, we could adjust by threshold or by intensity. So we could say, okay, I only wanted, you know, particular intensities to be included. So once we kind of do this, we could say, now we have these hit points that will be laid out for us. Now these hit points will allow us to navigate. So if I was here on my project window, I think it's wrong keyboard shortcut. But if I'm here and if I wanted to navigate, I could hit like Alt or Option N plus B to navigate based on the hit points of the file. So these are kind of where, and then we could use hit points to also do some additional functions, including create slices. We can create a groove. So if I say, oh, I want to quantize all of my MIDI or other audio parts to this, I could extract those hit points and create a groove quantize preset so that when we open this up, this is our groove applied from that. Now, one of the things that can be extracted from the hit points is going to be warp markers. So if I wanted to now come over here and do audio warp, and most of the time when we do this, it's going to be free warp, I could now just say, you know, like, oh, this note was a little too early. And we're not actually just kind of moving the event, we're just stretching it so that this event, you know, it won't create kind of an unnatural gap. So I could just kind of time compress and expand the audio around the warp point. So the warp marker is one of the things that you could translate from the hit points as kind of the overall detection. And from hit points, we could make warp markers, groove quantize presets, slice the audio, and navigate the audio. So we could think of, like, you know, when you have a guitarist or like a bass player, someone that comes in a little early, a little late, just taking those and being able to just kind of nudge rhythmically right into a specific area. And when you grab a point, you'll see that it'll just turn gray. And then you could just kind of move that hit point of where you want that event to fall without affecting the length of what's going on before or after it. Great. Just going through more comments. Thanks for all the great questions. Just navigating back. My chat field jumped on me. Sorry about that. Okay, so we have a question. Hey, Greg, can you explain more about how to use an analyzer when mixing or bouncing to a mixdown file? Okay, so let's take a look at some of the different parts here. So let's go back to our Beatles and Stones project since people like that one. Okay, so when we wanted to come here, I'm just going to revert this because I may have destroyed it in bad, horrible live stream edits. Okay, so I'm going to just look at some of the analyzer functions that we're going to have in. And I'll just look at the supervision. So I will just open up one of the presets that I made. Let's call this so here I could check for different phase issues. So if we had, you know, like different tracks that were out of phase, you may see kind of like very diagonal lines or very narrow. So that's probably a healthy phase. We can see what frequencies are going on, our levels to make sure that we're not peaking. So, you know, if I had a process here, let's say it was. So now you can see, okay, there's probably too much low end information here. So I could see that kind of represented. We could also see if you're going to have different frequency anomalies, and sometimes you could see if there's actual phase. I'll just kind of jump over here to, let's say if we're looking at, you know, I could switch these different meters here to. That was okay. Up until now, that was okay. Suddenly it's Beatles or Stones. So here with this, you could actually see, when we go to the multi-correlation, you could actually see particular frequencies that are out of phase as you're working. So you may go, okay, where is a phase problem? Something weird is going on. You could actually look at it and find different frequency anomalies here. So a lot of people would use this for phase. So, you know, but if you wanted to just kind of look at some of the, you know, some of the great presets here. So if you wanted to say, okay, I wanted to look at here with my So here we could see our different phase relationships and our level and frequencies here in the middle. So if I want to change this to a spectrum bar, you can see there's a lot of activity. And then it'll show you the actual frequency here. So you could see exact what frequency that you may have too much of that you wanted to EQ away from. And you could do that in the multi-correlation as well. So lots of great functionality that you could access with the built-in metering in Supervision. See, Kywin Franklin is trying to listen while working, so. All right, so I just see nice color palette in the comping project. Where can I get it? So I think, I don't have everything that I use for my colors here. I believe are just all standard colors, but we'll see. Yeah, so again, it's just the default colors. That's all I'm using. So I don't have anything special. So you have that color combination on by default already. But if you wanted to get it back, all you have to do, if you've gone color crazy, is just coming over here to the project menu to the project colors setup. And then you just go to the presets, and you could just kind of change. So if you go to 8 to 2, this will be kind of the colors there. So, okay. So I just see a question, is there a way to automatically have those selections automatically fade into each other? And this is from Sean Madigan. Okay, I see the comp selections. So, when you do the comp selections, you could come right over here. There is a function that you could just automatically turn on auto fade settings. So you could have auto fade ins and fade outs or auto crossfades. So once you start doing this, this will automatically put a short fade in, fade out at every edit point on a particular track. So sometimes you may not want it, but you could just enable the auto fade settings right here from the inspector. Okay, so I just see question. Hey, Greg, when I'm in MIDI editor and audition a note, bass or pad, the note gets caught up in a loop. What am I doing or not doing correctly? The only way of stopping it is to delete the track. All right, so let's say I'll just jump back to the other project here. We have some MIDI parts. Okay. All right. It says. Okay. So when I'm in a MIDI editor, audition a note. Okay. So let me just set up the audition here. Let me activate the project first. Sorry about that. All right, so it says every time you audition a note, it gets caught in a loop. What am I doing wrong correctly? Any way of stopping it to delete? Only way of stopping it is to delete the track. So I can't repeat that. So if this is what you're doing, Keith. So that's kind of just playing back kind of as expected there without any looping. So see if it's only with one particular instrument or if it's with all instruments that does it. Just wondering if it's like a hardware sampler or a software sampler, maybe that's not has the sounds loaded up. We see that in the old days with hardware samplers where, people would send a program change and it would do that and it could kind of get hung up. But see if you use like just a built-in VST instrument, if you get the same things or if it's the same consistent behavior with all virtual instruments. All right. All right, so we have a question from Dimitri. Hello, Greg. Thanks for such useful videos. Can I disable comping so just one version will be on track without any additional lanes? Thanks. So let's take a look. So there's a different approach to this. So if you don't want to take a lane-based approach, you could also come here. So let's say I have multiple lanes here, but I don't necessarily want to work with the lanes. I just want to have those and maybe select one particular take. So if you go to the bottom center, you'll see this little triangle appears. There you could select the different takes. So you can say, okay, I want to do take 3. Okay, I only want to use take 5 and not see any of the lanes. So just click in the bottom center, and then you could utilize and select the different takes right there. So if you don't want to do a compilation of different elements of different takes, okay, take 4 was perfect, done. You could just go to the bottom center of the event and select the different takes there. All right, we see my colleague Neil Patton is on the live stream. So wonderful district manager, Yamaha in America. So thanks for joining us, Neil. He's been with Yamaha for many years. He's a wonderful district manager, sales representative in Southern California. Thanks for joining us today. Okay, we have a question. Hi from Berlin. Hi from Berlin. That's how they say it when I'm in Germany, at least. What is the proper way of opening up insert effects to edit them in Groove Agent SE Mixer? If I click or double click one of the effects in the internal mixer, nothing happens. A bug. Windows 10, Cubase 11 Pro. Okay, so let's say if I have Groove Agent 1, or let me just... Sorry, don't have Groove Agent 1. It's old. But I'll come right over here. Let's add an instrument track. And we'll go to Groove Agent SE. Okay. So let's say, and we'll do this with... okay, so let's say if I come over here to the mixer... so as soon as I go to the studio EQ, so let's say if this will be on a beat agent kit. So when I come here, as soon as you click on the name, you'll see all the parameters for the, directly show up underneath here. So this is kind of the user interface for that. So that's how you could do it when you're going into the mixer. And let me load up. Might be slightly different on an acoustic agent kit. All right, so when we go to the mixer here, so let's say I will go. Okay, so let's say we will kind of pop over here so we could see kind of your channel strips here. Let's go to, if we come over here to like the effects. So again, just clicking on the effects that you'll see them show up directly underneath. This is kind of like the effect parameter, the plugin, the little plugin parameters. So anywhere that you kind of go to the particular agent, you could do directly there as well. So let me know if that works for you. All right, you see Michael Pierce has gotten his Mellotron Happiness from the Beatles and Stones song. All right, so we see from the event grid preference for Michael Romanowski, just on new projects, but not from templates, to set this to grid. All right, so I'll set this to events here. Let's do new project. So it looks like it's going to be to default to grid, but it's really maybe one more mouse click, if that, to start from a template if you want it to. There are also, keyboard shortcuts that you could activate to, switch to the next grid type. But if you wanted to automatically do it, it would just be done through a template, Michael. I'll mention that as well. Okay, reading through comments here. All right, so we have Marcos Gomez from Brazil on the live stream. So it says, hi all, I have a question. It's possible to bypass the effects of the UR22 preamp and use another preamp. UR22 pre's giving noise even with volume 0 set. Research has shown it's an error. So generally the UR22 mic pre's are, are going to be very clean. So it could depend on your source that you're utilizing. So, if you're going XLR, I believe if you go 1/4 inch that it will go line level by default. And if you go XLR input, it gets fed into the mic preamp of the UR22. So you may want to make sure that you're going into the, going in 1/4 inch as opposed to XLR. And also, probably more noise would be coming if you're using the UR22 through and using your Alesis 3630 compressor. That's probably going to be way more noisy than the UR22 preamps. Okay. All right, switch projects here, back. Okay, so I just see question. What is the shortcut keys for zoom in and out horizontal? So just G and H, right smack dab in the middle of your computer keyboard. So it's kind of something that you do all the time. And then if you hold down Shift G and Shift H, we could zoom vertically. So just G and H, just like that. So give that a shot and let me know if that works for you. Okay, so we see from Alex Gunner Music, says, Greg, the insert silence worked a treat. Thanks, so very happy. That's great. Yeah, those are powerful. Using the range editing tools is incredibly powerful. So thanks for letting me know it worked. All right, so we have a question. I usually work in 48K, but some of the older clients still send me 44K, 44.1K waves. Is there an disadvantage to stay in 48K and letting Cubase convert the files automatically? I would just, people have different feelings on this, but I would just kind of work in the native sample rate just because I've just talked to so many people that's like, yeah, man, I love the mix. And this happened to a friend of mine who's like a world famous engineer, one of the most highly regarded engineers in the world. And, you know, and early on when he was using Steinberg products, he turned in a mix. It's like, wow, we love the mix, but it's like a little slow. You know, and he mixed the whole thing at the wrong sample rate. So it could happen to the best people. So, you know, if a project comes in at 44.1, it's okay to leave it at 44.1. You know, it's unless you have like a huge clocking scenario, or if you're, you know, if it's your audio interface switches, you know, it's you know, there's no, you know, you're probably better off keeping it the same sample rate for them, because if they're expecting 44.1 and you send them a 48K file, it could get messed up on their end. There's some systems like Dante Virtual Sound Card where switching the sample rate with something that should, you know, be really obvious. I know in the past, I'm not sure if it's been changed, but, you know, it was almost like restarting your whole computer just to switch sample rates is something you could do on a USB audio interface, and like, you know, in, you know, 14 milliseconds, it's no problem. So, but, you know, some people, and I see Jazz do just iterating, you know, just that most things will be delivered at 48K. There's still a lot of stuff being done at 44.1 as well. I know many film composers do it 44.1 and will just record it at 48K as a final source and work at 44.1 because they're doing CDs as well. All right. All right, so we see Randy Lee from Texas on the live stream. Thanks for joining. So we see Antares Auto-Tune for FL Studio. Can I use in Cubase? So I think, you know, if it's just the VST plugin, you can use the VST plugin in Cubase. I don't think that there is a special version for FL Studio. It's just a VST plugin. So, and since Steinberg invented the VST technology, it will work, should work without problems. So make sure it's a 64-bit VST and you should be all set. All right, my chat field jumped on me. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. Thanks for all the wonderful questions. Again, if you've learned something new, make sure that you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. All right, so I just see a question. After I import a MIDI file, the edit instrument button is disabled on all the channels. Why? So it could be, it depends on the settings that you're using. So let's say if I, let's see if I have a MIDI file. Let's see what's in this one here. All right, no data. Let me try another. All right, but the settings that you want, you know, it could be depending on preferences that you have set. So by default, MIDI files will, when importing, will automatically import to Halion Sonic SE as a destination. But you may want it, and if you have it set to MIDI tracks, those won't necessarily be assigned to a particular instrument, so that when you go to edit, you know, there may not be an instrument assigned because you may want to physically assign the particular sounds to instruments in your disposal. And the same for MIDI instrument tracks. So it may not just be actually assigned to a particular instrument. So that's why there could be not an instrument to open. But check your settings here once again under preferences, and you'll see under MIDI file, and under destination. That's what you want it to check there. So check that and try Halion Sonic SE, and that will load up a general MIDI bank. All right, so you see from Mike, thanks, Greg, for answering the render in place question. I was messing up by not selecting the actual clip I wanted to render. I was expecting it to render the whole looped selection track. Yeah, so yeah, you just have to actually select. If you wanted to do the whole looped selection track, you could just come over, and when you do an export audio mix down, that would be based on the loop. But for render in place, you need to have the events selected for it to know what to render. So you can kind of do both ways. All right, so we see DJ Alukik says, need to buy Cubase soon. So yeah, do it soon because you can get upgraded as part of the grace period to Cubase 12 when it's released. All right, just reading through comments. Okay, so I just see a question. I'll just read it here. After using the library manager to move VST instruments, could I or should I delete the VSTs in the original location? On my Mac, they're in the root library folder. So generally the VSTs, you know, the VST plugin itself is a very small file, but the content that comes with the VST instruments, if you moved them, you know, so make sure that you don't delete the plugin file that plays back the content. So often the content is what the library manager does, and depending on, it says in your Mac, they're still in the root library folder. So that's where the VSTs are going to be looked at. But again, the VSTs are very small, so leave them in their place, but move the content that the VSTs access using the library manager. So I just see with purchase of Cubase 12, will I get access to 12 elements? So I'm not sure how the licensing will work. You know, I believe currently, and I didn't think this was the case, but I was proven wrong on the live stream, that the Cubase 11 Pro would open up a Cubase 11 Elements version, but I haven't, you know, with the licensing change, I'm not sure if Cubase 12 Pro will open Cubase 12 Elements. So not actually sure. All right. Okay, read through comments. And just see a comment, and this may have been, you know, about the MIDI being stuck with from Keith Young, his question. And if you have MIDI that's just kind of, if the MIDI is playing constantly, you know, try to come over here and just go to the MIDI menu to reset, and then you should be able to, that will send kind of like a mass MIDI off note message. So if you have MIDI notes that are stuck, you could try that. Okay, so we have a question. Any idea what Groove Agent, if I use a drum map as opposed to normal MIDI editor, I don't get any sound coming out of Groove Agent. Dragging out a note works fine, but a drum hit note with drum map won't. So probably what it is you're using a drum map. So let's say if I come over here, let's add an instrument track. I'll try that. Okay, so now when I come over here, we can say, right, so I have, so let's say I have like my drums here, so different sounds spread across the different MIDI notes. So probably what you're doing is when you go to the drum map area, you're just using GM map. And when we go to GM map, now it's often what could happen is the MIDI channel may be set to MIDI channel 10. So try, instead of using the GM map, with Groove Agent, you could have it automatically extract the map. So try creating, instead of GM map, try just the create drum map from instrument, and then that will automatically show you everything here, and the channel will be mapped appropriately. So if you're using a GM map, it may automatically send it to MIDI channel 10. But just try to, again, select it here, go to the drum map, and then just create drum map from instrument with Groove Agent SE. It's a beautiful feature. Utilize that, and I think that will help you. All right, great to see Sable Winters on the live stream as well. And just a quick reminder that we will be doing our Zoom meetup for the end of month. I think Fridays is the last live stream of the month. I think that's the last one. So, all right, and my chat field just jumped on me. Okay, just reading through comments. Everyone's happy to say hi to each other. All right, so we have Fred Robinson on the live stream. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so I just see, can I create an operation with the Project Logical Editor that can record a track, and when it gets to the end of a cycle, stops recording on the first and then starts recording on the next track below to do live loop recording? So I don't know of a way to do that. So I've tried this with the Project Logical Editor. So I think you might have to manually do that, but I don't think that there's an automated process. You could just, set up a foot switch to navigate going down if you wanted to do that. So if you're recording guitar and you don't want to, if both of your hands are occupied on your instrument, you could have a foot switch just navigate down to do kind of a live loop recording. But there's no way in the Logical Editor in the Project Logical Editor to do that I know of. All right, so Fred Robinson's happy to be button smacker number 125. All right. Okay, reading through more comments. Lots of great discussion going on. Okay. All right. So we see from Jay, it's like, hi, Greg, would you be so kind as to share with the Steinberg team that Android users are also hoping for a version of IC Pro, laptop screen size, difficult to control, connect controls. So I'll pass it along to them again. It was originally out, and then there was like some, a host of technical issues going on with Android at the time. So you may be able to find it. I think it might still be hanging out if you go to the Amazon App Store, you might be able to still find it there. But I will reiterate that comment and pass it on to the team. Okay. Okay, so I think I'm at the end of the discussion. So let me go ahead and I know we had some questions that were mailed in. See how we're doing on time. Okay, so we're doing well on time. All right, so bear with me for a second. All right, and I've answered some of these over email, but we'll share for the benefit of attendees. So it says, when I launch Cubase, there's a note that plays like I'm hitting a key on my synth. Then when I'm playing my synth, it will launch a different menu items in Cubase. How do I turn this off? Equipment, Cubase Elements 11, Yamaha MoX F8, Yamaha Montage, Windows 10. Thanks. This is from Alan in Bellevue, Washington. So when you get into situations like this, it's often what can happen is you go into your studio setup, and we can configure MIDI information for control surfaces. And a lot of times many keyboards may use like a Mackie control protocol for transport functions or for opening windows like the mixer, opening, different common windows so that, we could edit plugins, turn this on. So, but these will all be connected via a MIDI port. So one MIDI port could be sending MIDI messages, but it could also, if it's sent for a control surface, it could also be set for doing stuff like, when I hit play on my Mackie control, it just sends a MIDI note message. So sometimes I get this whenever I play, I hit a function, a button on my control surface, it plays MIDI notes for me. Or whenever I'm playing my MIDI keyboard, it's opening up different windows for me. Why? And that's because the MIDI port, the communication channel, is set up, and they need to kind of be independent. But if we go to your studio menu, to the studio setup, and it's just at the very bottom, and you go to the MIDI port setup, if we just come over here and we could say in all MIDI inputs, in this way, if we have like my CC121, I don't want to, when I have a Groove Agent channel selected, that if a function button is transmitting a MIDI note, and I have the MIDI input port set to in all MIDI inputs, I don't want that to transmit the note sound on a currently selected MIDI track. So a lot of times what you may do, and there's a lot of documentation between different hardware controllers, and if you read the directions, they'll say, okay, now go to the MIDI port setup and deactivate in all MIDI input ports, and that will kind of get it cleared up for you. Okay, so let's go to next question. All right, just jump back to different project here. Okay. All right, so hello, I've been asking for answers, but so far unable to work it out. My question is regarding global remote control plugins on the master bus. Is there any way to set up and assign a remote control, i.e. MIDI controller or even keyboard switch, to be able to switch parameters on plugins when the plugin is on the master bus? So you should, so one should be able to, should work regardless of what channel you're currently active, you're sitting on in Cubase. For example, if I had to plug in Alliance, ADPTR, Metric AB on my master bus, and I want to be able to switch the AB button in the plugin without needing to open up the plugin and use the mouse. So if I was working on a kick drum channel, without needing to click on the plugin, I want to be able to assign a button, a remote controller, and have it switch the AB button while I'm still on the kick channel. So sometimes a globally assigned remote function that is tied only to the ADPTR plugin. Okay, so what we could do is, let's say if I have a plugin, and we could just put this on our master bus. So I'll come to my mix console here. All right, and I'll just put an insert. So, and we could do this really with pretty much any parameter. I will come over here to Dynamics, and let's use this Squasher plugin. And I will destroy this beautiful song. Sorry about that. Let me just...
You used to love when I played Hey Jude.
Okay, so let's say I wanted to set up my MIDI remote control to turn on and off this plugin or a function in the plugin. So how can we do that? So we can do this through the generic remote. So I'm going to come to my studio menu to Studio Setup, and we're going to click here and add a generic remote if you don't have one. And what a generic remote will do is actually kind of take incoming MIDI messages and do different functions. And these will serve as kind of a global function. So we need to make sure that we have the right MIDI ports in and out. I will come over here to Fader, and I'm just going to click on Learn. And this will, at the top, will be the incoming MIDI message. And the bottom is what function that incoming MIDI message does. So I'm going to hit a MIDI note message here. So hit C, whatever, C6 or something. And what I want to do is go to Mixer, and we're going to choose our stereo out, and we'll see Insert 1, Squasher, and I'll just choose Bypass. So as we open this up, and I'll just open this up for visual reference, if I did everything right, now I can hit the key, and that will turn off.
I should have told you were out of tune. Whatever you did, that was okay.
So that's all you have to do to, you know, set up a MIDI message to control a function in whatever track that you have selected. It doesn't matter. So as I'm coming over here, let's say if I have this on,
I should have told you were out of tune.
Select the MIDI track.
Whatever you did, that was okay.
So that way that particular MIDI control, whatever is actively stated, just directly communicates and will do that function on the plugin. All right, so we have a question. How to control the pitch of a vocal file with a knob. Okay, so I'll just have a project here this may work well on. Okay, so let's say I just have a vocal file here, and I had my friend Daryl Pearson, who's on one of our Zoom meetups a couple months ago, and we just had him sing, and I just, for a different use case, I had him just sing one single note.
So that he can get what he needs accomplished with this program.
All right, so, and then what I did is I just dropped this into a sampler track. Okay, so now, like while this is playing, if I wanted to, you know, trigger this particular note, I could now at this point just come over here and let me just set the correct.
I am singing this phrase for.
And then what we could do, if I wanted to change the pitch, I'm going to come over here in the pitch bend. I'm going to set it up an octave. So as I adjust the pitch bend, even though he's singing one note,
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can.
And I put this also into audio warp so that when we're playing it back,
I am singing this phrase for Greg
so that it plays back at the same rate without audio warp enabled.
I am singing this phrase for.
But if I wanted to play back at the same steady tempo, I could just come here.
I am singing this phrase for Greg so that he can get what he needs accomplished with this program. This is a recording.
So you could do and control the pitch directly of the sample without changing the speed, just using the pitch bend wheel. And you could set the amount of pitch bend here in the lower left-hand corner. Okay, and we had a question mailed in. And let me get a project open that could show this. Let me find a project here quickly. Okay, so the question is, when running current arranger chain, I want sometimes to mute, jump over one or two sections in the current arranger chain editor window. If I try to set this section to 0 and play also, try to mute the arranger track, none is possible. Have I missed something? My workaround is to remove the section and remember to do command copy arranger chain, but this is circumstantially clumsy. The turn around time and will be too long. For example, note sign musical mode and arranger track field. So let's go take a look. So, you know, if you're not familiar with the arranger track, there's, you know, this is all sorts of goodness here of being able to do different types of arrangements. So if you know, have a particular file and let's say, you know, I want it to, you know, as we're playing, if I don't want it to play back linearly, like straight from left to right, I could just, so when it gets to here, it's going to go to the intro. right, so we could have all of our sections of our song defined as different arranger events, and then we can just come over here and we could have parts within a part, overlapping parts, and then once we have all these parts, we could just drag and drop them in. So I think what the question wants to do is to come over here and let's say if we have the arranger chain on, so let's say while we're playing this, right, so this will take us to the next chain step. So say we'll go back. So I'm not sure if you're using these for, and I believe if we go to your key commands, that so we'll go here to the edit menu to the key commands, that you could set up key commands to just kind of jump between the events. So let's say we'll go to the arranger, so you could trigger these individual keyboard shortcuts, you know, the different arrangers, you know, 20 events there. You could also do it through MIDI. So let's say I have it set up where as we do this, so if I'm here in my project, I could just jump to the next event, but I see where maybe it's not just jumping, like skipping to different events, so you may have to but let's say if I wanted to come here, and then we could have the chain mode, and we could just say let's do this at 1 beat. So let's say if I just do the jump mode, so if I wanted to skip from verse 1 to this part, so you could do stuff like that. But sometimes if you have MIDI notes that don't get a MIDI note off message when you switch, that could cause some issues. So try, you know, switching to jump mode here to 1 beat, and then you could kind of jump and select different parts. And you could assign those to MIDI notes as well. So if you're doing live performance, it's a great solution. All right, so I think that's okay, so we had a question, I think this is sent in from Soren. So question is, before starting to mix, you might want the track sound levels to be the same, 0 VU or minus 18 dB full scale is mentioned. And there are several different ways in Cubase to raise the volume level of tracks, event before inserts and all. There is one, the square on the actual event center, which you can move up and down, and it changes the waveform. So it's good, and just show that here. So if I wanted to just zoom in here, so we could adjust kind of just the waveform to adjust the level here, or two, in the mixer window, you could activate the rack, pre-filters, phase, and change the gain on the slider. So let's go to our mixer window. We'll come right over here. And when we go to the pre, that we could have a gain adjustment here on the particular track. All right, so there's two different ways. It doesn't, so in the mixer, it does not change the gain on the waveform shape, and it is the same as pressing the track's edit button and go to the channel settings and change the gain. Can you explain why there is two? For what purpose would you use one over the other? what way should I use when I prepare my audio for mixing? So I would say I tend to think of this particular model of gain adjustment, the clip gain. Let's say if I'm here, a lot of times I use this more for editing. You know, when I say, okay, I need to get a breath out, what I want to do is just to kind of come here and cut. And I wanted this word to be a little louder. Shift X, and I want to bring that up or down. So I will often kind of do more corrective, kind of maybe editing based gain staging here on the project. And then when I'm mixing, you know, if I'm doing a whole mix and let's say I don't want to use a VCA fader and I have a lot of existing automation and I just need more or less gain, I could adjust the pre-gain here. And sometimes, you know, both the gain that we see in the pre-section and the gain that we see on a clips come before the insert. So I know some people will whack the gain up here and then totally squash the compressor and kind of get the coloration of the compressor to do that. So, you know, I would use this, you know, more for, okay, I just want to take this all up and I just don't have the gain here, or I wanted to manipulate the gain. That's when I would use the pre-section, and when I would use the clip gain would just be for, you know, very, you know, more corrective, like, you know, minimizing breaths, being able to, you know, take out, you know, make this syllable a little, you know, a little louder or a little softer. So I would treat this gain handling like a, you know, more for corrective purposes and treat the other one more in the mixing stage. That's how I would do it. But there's, you know, good, there's overlap between them as you discovered. All right, so that was the questions that were mailed in. Let me jump back. Okay, just finding my place. All right, so we see, hey, Greg, have some issues when I put an instrumental MP3 on an audio track. I'm trying to find the key for it through the stock plugins, but I'm having some issues. Can you help me with this? So, you know, there isn't a way, you know, we could do kind of the chord track has detection for MIDI parts, but it doesn't have chord detection for polyphonic chords. So there's nothing really in the current version of Cubase that will allow you to, you know, determine, you know, the key of an MP3 audio file. So. So we see from Jay from Connecticut says 3 hours of show, 86 people watching. Greg is caught up in the show's questions in near real time. Greg's organic word clock is more reliable than calculations from Star Trek's Borg. So I'm just trying to get through as many questions as I can to help people out. So thank you. So I just see, does someone use TDR Nova? How can I sidechain TDR Nova in Cubase? So I'm not familiar with it, but if you wanted to sidechain, you know, plugins. So let's say if I wanted to sidechain, you know, two different sounds, we can show you how to do this. I'm not sure if it's just, if it's, you know, it's helpful. It's, you know, eminently faster and easier if it is a VST3 plugin, but to set up sidechaining, and this may be very similar to what you're utilizing, it may be the same kind of workflows, but let's say if I come here and I want to have, let's say, this synth sidechain from the kick so that we hear the kick better. What I want to do is to, and this may just kind of work, so I'll just come over here to the audio channel. We're going to add the compressor. So if maybe it's the TDR Nova, I'm not familiar with the plugin, but if it has sidechaining capability in the plugin, and not all plugins have this, you can just come right over here, activate the sidechain input within the plugin GUI. And then if you go to the settings, we could just say, now I want to add my sidechain input. So I'll select my channel. And at this point, I could... So now every time that the kick comes in, the sidechain, it'll trigger the compressor that's on the bass. So that's how that would work. So see, if it's a VST3 plugin, you want to activate the sidechain within the plugin interface, and then just go to the sidechain setup and tell it what channel that you're sidechaining from. So if it's a typical VST3 plugin, that same methodology will work for basically any plugin. So. All right, so we see question, moving between laptop and studio, Hallion cannot find samples, moved Hallion libraries with library manager on both, but to different places, then back to the same place on laptop, Hallion still complains. Did full search of both disks, still complains, can't load samples again, but losing presets. So what I would do is, if you have the VST connect, it'll be a VST sound file between them. So, and just okay. So just double click on the VST. You'll basically, the content file will be a .vst sound file. So you could move it with a library manager, but also if you double click on the location where the library file, where that .vst sound preset is, that will launch the library manager. You could right click and say start in Steinberg library manager, and then that will make the change. You could also, let's say if we're here and we have instrument track, so let's say, okay, I just want to go to so let's say, if you do it in Hallion or Hallion Sonic SE, you could, once you're here, there is kind of a, I think there's like a rescan feature. But you could also just kind of come over here to the browser and see if you see, like the VST sound directly in here. So you should see all the different libraries, and then I think you could, I think there's a way to kind of have it rescan for the content. But see if you see them listed here, but you could also go to this computer. So if you have it in Hallion or Hallion Sonic, you could look there as well. But try just to, where the actual location is, try just double clicking on a file, and that should find and set the link between the content and the instrument. All right, so we see feature request from Tiago. Says feature request for global project versioning. Track versions work fine, and mixed console snapshots work fine, but it would be interesting to have versioning features to group all together with text notes. So yeah, I've kind of passed on a similar feature request in before, kind of integrating those and some other functions together. So maybe in the future we could see something like that. Okay, so we see, hey Greg, how do I rename a bunch of tracks together to the same name? Okay, so let's say, so it's tracks. All right, so let's say I have audio 1 through 8, and I want to rename these tracks. So we could do this in the project logical editor. So let's come right over here to the project logical editor. And what I want to do is say, we're going to say media type is equal to, or we'll say container type rather, is going to be equal to track. And in this case, I'll just do to the selected tracks. So I'll say, and property is event is selected. And what I want to do is to name, and we will replace names, and I'll just call this live stream. All right, and then I could hit apply. All those tracks are now renamed to live stream. Let me see if that's... So that's how you could do it. So once again, container type is equal to track. We want the function set to transform property. And in this case, since I had these tracks selected, I could do event is selected. I don't necessarily have to do that, but it would do all tracks. And then under action target, we have name. I could replace, I could append, prepend, generate a name, replace search strings. So we could do stuff like that as well. So let me know if that works. Okay, reading through comments. Thanks for all the great questions. All right, so we have 141 likes. It's beautiful. Thank you so much. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you do that. And once again, on Friday, we'll be doing our Zoom meetup. So look forward to seeing everyone and meeting new faces and new people on the Zoom. See, Sable Winter's still working on her version of Beatles and Stones. I can't wait to hear it. All right, so we see Soren likes just thanking me for the gain stage explaining between the clip gain and the pre-gain. Okay, just still reading through comments. We see some discussion on Beatles and Stones, Sable Winters versions. Everyone's excited, so I'm sure everyone's going to love your version, Sable. Okay, so we see, hi Greg, thank you for your help. Renan from Brazil. Why when I use Very Audio, every time it keeps appearing the yellow message, the algorithm changed to standard solo? Can I hide it? I think that there might be, so, you know, Very Audio uses, you know, a specific algorithm for its, you know, pitch detection and segmentation. But I think you might be able to, let's get to Very Audio. And I think there is, you might be able to hide that message. So, you know, it's one of those things where it'll just do it and it'll switch it, but it's just telling you to let you know. But I think that there is, if you, and I haven't tried this, but try going to the preferences to Very Audio and selecting, checking, activating, inhibit warning when changing the sampled data. And that may stop that message, but, you know, once the message is there, it's just kind of giving you a heads up that it is switching the stretching algorithm to one that works with Very Audio. Okay, so we see just further clarification from Sean saying there is no problem with Hallian knowing where the file is. It's set up just fine in the library manager, so I can load the instrument fresh just fine. But when I try to open up a project from the other machine, Hallian asks to do the rescan, but can't find it. So, you know, I go back and forth between 3 or 4 computers, and I haven't had it, you know, my Hallian and access kind of, you know, the same Hallian libraries across, you know, 4 computers. And I haven't had any problem once Hallian kind of recognizes it. But if you want to email me a screenshot of the picture, you could send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'd be happy to kind of take a look at it, and I could try to see if I get my systems not to cooperate with me. But if you want to send me just a screenshot, but I'll see if I could recreate it in the next day or two. And see also just further information. It just says, it's like the project preset setting. Will not forget about the directory path. I have to reload the instrument and reset all the settings, which is fine if it was just made, but then you're days in. Sorry about that. But I haven't come across that, and I've kind of, you know, I go back and forth between multiple computers, and it hasn't been an issue for me. So I just see from Best Cream Jesus. So were you able to get to my email? So I took a quick look at the file, but you know, it seemed like it was still. I'll spend some more time with it, and I'll email you back with it. But it seemed, you know, I saw where the Groove Agent wasn't working for you in that way. But I meant to look at it more today, and I was sorry if I was a little unprepared for that. So, but I'll look at it and respond to you via email. Apologies for that. All right. So I just see from Jeff Sabelski, does the cursor have to be set at the beginning of the clip when selected to change sample rate? So no, it doesn't. It's not contingent upon the cursor position. So, you know, you could change the sample rate a number of different ways, but it's not really contingent upon the cursor position. Okay, so I think I'm at the end of the questions. Let's see how we're doing on time. So we got a couple of minutes here. We'll see if there's any more questions that kind of sneak in. If not, we'll wrap up a couple minutes early. So again, we will be doing the Zoom meetup for Friday's live stream. So that means we'll be doing a 2-hour live stream, and we'll do like they sometimes last 3.5, 4 hours, the Zoom meetups with everyone kind of getting to know each other. So I look forward to seeing some new faces and seeing people that have been on the previous Zoom meetups. That are always a wonderful discussion. So I'll try to line up someone that could share some insights in the next day or so, but we'll see if there's any other questions that kind of sneak in. If not, we will wrap up a couple minutes early. Thanks everyone for wonderful questions. I hope that everyone has learned a new tip or trick. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up a couple minutes early. Thank you so much, and look forward to seeing everyone on Friday, starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern. Everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and look forward to seeing everyone on Friday's live stream. Thank you.